Christian Parenting.
Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Steph Thurling. I'm the Executive Director of Christian Parenting, a mom of 3, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a place where you can bring your real self, no matter what that looks like today, and be given the space, resources, and encouragement you need to set aside perfection and grow into the perfectly imperfect parent God made you to be. I am loving summer and definitely don't want to rush this time, but fall is going to be here before we know it. And as you start to think about back to school, I want to encourage you to think about how you can be praying for your kids this school year. It's so easy to get caught up in the daily tasks of parenting, like getting school supplies, coordinating the schedules, doing laundry, making snacks, and then making even more snacks. But as Christian parents, it's important to remember the big picture. The one thing that truly matters is teaching our kids to know, love, follow, and share Jesus. I am so excited to tell you that the Christian Parenting 2024-2025 Prayer Journal is now available. A Life of Faith, Knowing, Loving, Following, and Sharing Jesus is a prayer journal from Christian Parenting that was created just for you. This journal will guide you in praying over your kids every week of the school year. Together, we will pray that our children will know Jesus as their Savior, love Him with their hearts, minds, and strength, follow Him faithfully through their entire lives, and boldly share His good news with others. Thousands of parents use this journal every year. So join us as together we pray that our kids will live a full life of faith. You can visit cpgive.org to request your school year prayer journal, A Life of Faith. Again, that's cpgive.org to request your copy of A Life of Faith today. And it is more than just a journal. You can also listen to Pardon the Mess podcast each Monday to listen to guided prayer and reflection that follows along. So go request your copy today. Hey friends, welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast. Today we're doing something a little bit different, and we are resharing one of my favorite podcast episodes ever, my episode called The Worry-Free Parent with Sissy Goff. And if you haven't listened to this one yet, you are in for a treat, and if you have, listen again. Seriously, there's so much goodness packed into this conversation. I know that you will get something out of it, even if you've already listened before, because I keep thinking about it time and time again. So Sissy and I talk about why parents are so stressed out, different ways that our anxiety shows up in our parenting and how we can respond to that anxiety. And then we get really practical. So listen for some ways that you can help your kids grow to be more resilient, how you can calm yourself down, and some of the best ways to find a good counselor. One thing Sissy shared that I have thought about over and over again is the idea to reflect on the things that we are doing for our own kids that they can be doing on their own. So make sure you listen all the way through to catch that, because it has been a game changer for me. So enjoy this episode from Sissy Goff. Hey, Sissy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here today. You have been counseling kids for how many years?
30.
Yeah, 30
Yes.
years. Thousands of kids. You are kind of like the go-to resource for all things mental health. And so I'm really, really grateful that you're spending some time with us today talking about worry and anxiety. Thank you.
I'm honored to get to.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about worry and anxiety in parents and your new book, which I told you before we started recording, I loved and hated at the same time because it was so good. And I saw myself in so many of the pages that there were points I was like, oh man, in the best, I mean that in the highest form of compliment. It was so good and so helpful. So I'm excited to talk about it, but I want to talk about you first. So can you tell us about you, your background, your family, all the things that make you you?
Yes. So I am originally from Little Rock, Arkansas, and moved to Nashville to go to grad school at Vanderbilt. And my 1 year, I guess, into my graduate program, I interviewed with Melissa Trevathan, who is my boss still, and sat there in the interview so teary the entire conversation, thinking, this is what I always felt like I wanted to do, and I didn't even know it existed. And so 30 years later, I'm still working at the same place because I love it and I cannot imagine being anywhere else. And it is it's kind of a different counseling practice because so many kids are afraid to go to counseling, or if they're adolescents, sometimes they're infuriated about going to counseling. And so we try to do it really differently. And so we are in a little yellow house with a white picket fence. It's not so little anymore. We have about 2,000 families who are in counseling currently at Daystar. And my dog goes to work with me every day. She helps me counsel kids. We have 5 dogs on staff. I think we have 13 humans, but I'd rather count the dogs than the humans. And we have popcorn popping in the lobby typically. And I mean, our offices look like living rooms. It's really I think it's as disarming as you can get in terms of a counseling practice office. And so that is what I have the privilege to get to do every day. And out of that, have gotten to travel and speak and write some books and have a podcast that I share with my friend David Thomas, and Melissa does a lot with us too. And so really grateful to get to lean in and help parents, because I think, in all these years of counseling kids and families, I would say really probably as partly a result of the pandemic, but even outside of the pandemic, I just think it's never been harder to be a parent, to be a kid than today. And so I just feel really grateful and privileged to be in a place where I'm getting to share what I'm hearing in my counseling offices outside of the walls of Daystar with parents in different places.
And you do it so well. You're so encouraging and real and relatable. So I think you're just such an excellent resource for parents. So I really appreciate everything you write, everything you share, your podcast, Instagram. I'll link it all in the show notes. Everyone finds you.
You're so kind. Thank you so much.
And then I always ask all my guests, what is one thing that you want every parent to know? And I know you probably have a lot.
I would say in this day and time, I've never seen parents feel as discouraged, defeated, as much like failures as I would say I'm seeing today. And I think part of that is the information overload. When our parents were growing up, they didn't have anyone to compare themselves to. They didn't see all the other families that were doing all the other Pinterest-worthy things. And I think I would want to say to any parent who's listening, which obviously that's why they're listening to you, you're doing great. And that you are the type of parent who would tune into a Christian parenting podcast already says to me that you're doing great. And you're thoughtful and intentional and deeply committed to knowing and loving your kids well. And so I think when we can live out of that space, it's easier to unclench our tightness a little bit and be more present. In the new book that we're going to talk about, I talk about how anxiety tries to define our past, distract us in the present, and defeat us in the future when we're not even there. And so I think when we can kind of let go of that, those clenched, not fists out of anger, but more out of, I'm trying so hard, then I think we're freed up to be in all the places with more confidence and hope.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later too, because that's a large chunk of your book and it's so good. So you have Raising Worry-Free Girls and Braver, Stronger, Smarter. And now you have The Worry-Free Parent, and they're just such excellent resources. And in Worry-Free Parent, that's your newest one. You share a statement that someone said in your office, which I thought was so interesting. They said that we're the first generation of healthy parents. And you kind of talk a little bit about how that's true and untrue. And I totally agree with that. I just thought it was really interesting. So I'd love for you to talk about that statement for a little bit and like what they meant by that.
Well, I think I would say, now 3 decades worth of counseling, I would say today's parents are prioritizing mental and emotional health like no generation of parents I've ever seen, which is beautiful. And at the same time, I think today's parents are more anxious than any generation of parents I've ever seen. And we're now looking at 1 in 4 kids, 1 in 3 adolescents are dealing with anxiety, girls twice as likely, but we're also looking at 1 in 3 grownups, and women are twice as likely. So moms who are listening, it's so easy for us to lean that way as women. And so, I think it's really both things. We're better educated. My mom read one parenting book that was Dr. Spock. And the one thing she took from it was you're supposed to smile at your baby a lot, which I think was great because I think it was teaching you to be attuned which now we know attunement helps with self-regulation and all the things like that. And side note, I have one sibling who's 16 years younger than I am. And we both, if either of us get a compliment, it's that we smile all the time. So Dr. Spock knew something. He was doing something right.
He was onto something.
He was. But, we just weren't. I feel like I talk to parents who are just so panicky. And even all the Instagram accounts that are like, you only have 18 summers. You only have 18 blah, blah, blah. You only have so many left. I just think, every time I read that, I think, these poor parents that feel so panicky. Because then I think when we feel that kind of pressure, honestly, I think we get angry sometimes, or at least I do. When I'm living that tightly, that's the first thing that happens is I lose my patience. And so, I think it's beautiful how hard parents are trying. And I hate it for you as a parent that it feels like even more pressure, because then I think it makes us trip ourselves up. It's like me snow skiing. The harder I try to snow ski, the more I fall. But when I can relax and enjoy myself, I do a whole lot better. That's good talking to someone from Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
Do you snow ski some?
I do. And I married a man from Colorado. So
there you go.
Yes. So we are a skiing family. I'm not the best at it. As a Minnesotan, I don't love the cold. Which
that's funny.
Hard for me. I know. Yes. I was born and raised here. I'm stuck. My family's here. We love it here. I just don't like the cold. So, yeah. But I do want to talk a little bit about that pressure that we put on ourselves, because I think you're right that there has never been pressure like there is today, because it's not like we just get to own a home and that's great. Like, we have to own a home. It has to be beautifully decorated and perfectly clean. And it's not like our kids can just do sports and learn those great skills. Like, they do the most competitive skills. And you talk about how pressure breeds anxiety. And the concept of like fortune telling a child's life really caught my eye, because I see it and I do it all the time when I'm talking to other parents. Because, and I'm myself included. This is why your book was so hard to read, because I was like, I'm seeing myself in everything she's saying. But I think we stand around as moms and start chit-chatting, and we're like, oh, his grades aren't good. Is he ever going to get into high school? Or what about college? And then he forgot to feed the dog again. It's his one chore. He's never going to be responsible. Or is she going to, if she doesn't do a solo and dance this year, is she going to be behind? She's going to be behind. Then she's not going to make the next team. And we all sit around and talk about all the things that is going to happen to our kids because of one moment in time. So
yes. And then they're not going to be healthy, functioning adults.
No.
Yes, because they forgot to feed the dog once. Right.
They forgot to feed the dog when they were 7 years old. And so now they're not going to be they'll never be able to own their own dog.
Yes.
We go down this rabbit hole. It sounds extreme, but I mean, it's what we do. We fortune tell our kids' lives. So can you talk a little bit about that concept of how pressure breeds anxiety and fortune telling our kids' lives?
Just keeps us there. Yes, definitely. And you gave a million great examples. I mean, that's exactly what I talk to parents about in my office, who will say things like, he can't remember to bring home his homework. How is he ever going to drive a car? How's he ever going to get into college? And I think one thing that can be really helpful is to go back to when you were that age. And how many times did you forget to bring home your homework? Or whatever it was that they're missing at that age. Because really counseling kids for this many years, I would say the kids who at 8 are bringing home their homework every day, and the kids who are showing complete maturity and responsibility in all the ways are the kids who are the most burdened by anxiety right now, because they're trying so hard to do everything right, instead of learning through struggle and developing resilience and developing a sense of, oops, I can mess up and it's still okay. And I don't think enough parents, enough of us live with that today. So yes, I definitely think we've got to be really careful of forecasting, because if my mom did that, I remember, this is the most ridiculous thing. When I was in high school, my faith was really important to me. And I had a group of friends and we were all walking alongside each other. And we would literally, we would skip class. I remember skipping class and going to the Baptist bookstore and buying some Christian book and praying with my friend in the car while I was skipping class. And if my parents had been forecasting, they would have said, Sissy is going to be the biggest hypocrite to ever hit the face of the earth. That's absurd that I would be doing both of those things at once, but my brain wasn't finished developing. And there were a million stupid things, the times that I stole something once and from a friend, a pencil, I lied a few times. We all did those things when we were growing up. And we're healthy, functional adults for the most part, with a few mess ups still along the way. And so just to remember that, I think for kids is going to help them not be so anxious, and us as well.
Yeah. It really is true. We parent out of so much fear. And it is information overload. We just have too much coming at us. Too much. Not
and it's all different
in the news,
opinions.
Social media. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Even
Let's go back to the one
stuff.
parenting book.
I know, Dr. Spock. We all just need Dr. Spock. Smile at your kids. That's your takeaway from
just
this podcast.
Smile a lot and we're good. Yeah. Smile a lot and you'll be fine.
Right.
That's funny. So what are some of the other ways? So if parenting out of fear, feeling panicked, what are some of the other ways besides forecasting that you kind of see anxiety come out in parenting? You kind of talk about some of the different ways in your book.
Yeah, so I break it down into 5 types of parents that I see the most in my office.
Mm-hmm.
And one is the proverbial helicopter parent that we know that's hovering all the time, just trying to make sure everything's okay, protect their child. Then the snowplow parent that's trying to clear the path ahead of them. The bulldozer parent who is trying to go behind and clean up every mistake that their child makes. The sidecar parent, which made me think of Batman and Robin. And that parent, I see that parent all the time in my office who's saying things like, well, I was anxious when I was that age, for example, and I went to summer camp and it just wrecked me. It was awful. And I looked at my child's picture yesterday on their website and they weren't smiling. So I know they're having a horrible experience. They're not okay. They have no friends, when really that was your experience. And they might be not smiling because they're distracted or they, whatever it is that could be happening. But
because it was
right. But because it was my experience, it's going to be theirs. And then the last would be what I call parade float parenting, where I'm going to try and keep things happy and entertain them and not let any sadness come into the picture at all and do my best to make sure that happens. And none of those options include kids having an opportunity to develop resilience and confidence because they only develop those things when they're in the midst of hard things. We know suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. It starts with suffering. And kids need to struggle. And I love to ask parents, what are 2 things you're doing for your kids right now that they can do for themselves? And what are 2 things you're doing for your kids that they can almost do for themselves? And I want you to stop doing all 4.
That's good. When we're done, I'm going to write those down and be like,
oh, good.
For each of my kids, I'm going to do that. That's good. I want all the listeners to do that too, because I think that's something that's super small, but huge impact. That's easy to do. Wow.
Good.
That's good. Yeah. I feel like we can end right here. The end.
That
was great.
That's so fun to talk to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think that can parents, because when I was reading those, I was like, I see myself in all of these. Depending on the kid and depending on the moment, right? And what my past experience has been, maybe sometimes I will be a sidecar parent because I see them, or a parade. Can you be all those things? Or is that just me because I'm just extra anxious?
No.
Am I the only one?
You're not the only one. And I think that's a great point that with different kids, you're going to respond different ways because I have been with some kids recently who really significantly lacked resilience. And some of that's because I think their parents never let them push beyond what the parent believed the child was capable of, never backed off of those 4 things. And I think my guess is those kids were awfully manipulative and loud. Some anxious kids really know how to push our buttons. You're a terrible parent. Any parent would step in and help with this project. Or are you kidding me? All parents want to stop whatever from happening. So I think that's a hard thing about parenting anxious kids is they can be so loud and so manipulative, and not that they're trying to. It's a little bit like a drowning victim can try and drown you in the process just because they want to survive. And I think anxious kids become like that when they're trying to not have to do the scary thing. But everything that science tells us is that, what we're doing is we're retraining our brains. There's something called neuroplasticity, where our brains are literally growing. But unless the amygdala is activated, which is the part of our brain that's the fight or flight that reacts, unless that's activated, it can't grow. They call it activate to generate. And so kids have to do hard things to learn. We have to do hard things to learn, which may mean letting go of the 4 things. It may be that simple.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply. When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What are some other things that we can do besides the 4 things? Like if we're seeing this in our kids, we're seeing maybe some of that manipulation, or we're seeing it come out in different ways. And then we're starting to have the panicked response because it's just one big cycle. What are some things that we can do as parents?
Well, I would come up with some statements that you can say to your kids, like, wow, I can tell that's really hard, and you are so smart. I can't wait to see what you figure out. Or, I hear you that you feel anxious. I was just talking to a kid about that this week. They were having to do something in front of a lot of people. And I said, of course you feel anxious about that. Anybody would. And you are so capable. I mean, I think even to normalize that emotion, because kids today think something's wrong with me. I have a personality disorder because I feel anxious right now. Rather than a lot of life. In fact, I said to this kid, I said, everything I've ever learned to do that I'm proud of myself for made me anxious in the beginning. Every single thing. And so I think when we can have things we say to them like that, and then honestly, with a child who's that anxious and that loud and that manipulative, I would have a statement you say like that, and then I would get away from them. Because the more you stay there in close proximity, they're just going to keep whining and keep trying to default to you to fixing it for them. And then maybe you go to your room and you practice some deep breathing, and you have a statement you say to yourself, or a verse you've memorized that you say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, or whatever it is, over and over until you can calm yourself back down too.
Yeah, that's good too, because I feel like it's really hard as a parent when your kid's having a moment like that to walk away, because you want to help them. And we also read so many opinions. They're like, we're going to be a safe place and help them through this. And at a certain point,
space for it. Yeah.
Right. At a certain point, you have to not do that, is what I'm hearing you say, right?
That is exactly right.
Let them do it.
Yes. I think you want to start off being a safe place and being really empathetic. Right. But what I'm seeing is kids who will just wrap themselves around your leg as you stand there and just be completely dependent on you, rather than you can do this, you can do this. Right.
And we want to grow independent kids who can regulate their own emotions.
Exactly.
But it's so hard.
And I think there's something about the amygdala that's a little bit like if you lived in a dorm or a sorority house when you were in college. And you know how when one person would start their period, the whole hall was having their period at the same time. I think there's something about the amygdala that if your child's gets activated, yours immediately flips. Or if yours does, theirs immediately flips. And so there's just not a productive conversation we're going to get to in those moments, because our brains aren't even working in a rational way. So we've got to press pause and get away from each other for a few minutes.
We do in our house. There's a lot of times where we'll be in a moment like that with one of our kids. And I'm like, this conversation isn't going anywhere. So we're going to come back to it. Because I do it with my husband too, right? Like at a certain point, you talk yourselves in circles and you're like, this isn't working. Let's take a break.
Yes.
Or else we're all going to get frustrated.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's the amygdala. Good to know.
Yes, the amygdala. Which when the amygdala is working, that means all the blood has left the prefrontal cortex that helps us think rationally and manage our emotions and gone to the amygdala. So in fact, until we can calm our body back down, we're not even going to be capable of rational thought, which is why the breathing, as silly as I think it sounds sometimes, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, deep breathing is an amazing tool. We like to do, in our house, we pair that with prayer for our kids and for ourselves too.
Yes, I love that.
It's really helpful. Yeah, we'll say, Lord, give me peace as we do like deep breaths. Try to get everyone calm so we can be somewhat rational.
That's so good.
Okay, so you have a whole chapter on this concept, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Like it's the chapter's called Try Softer. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I have a very wise friend who was, she's so wise that she wasn't saying to me, try softer. She was saying, I need to learn to try softer. I think when I really needed to learn to try softer. And I'm anxious myself. Mine shows up as perfectionism, which, by the way, spoiler alert, if you're type A, you are anxious. We just probably weren't in counseling, processing our anxiety. And so we got really productive instead. And so I try hard at really everything I do, with thus the like clenching up, tightening up, and making it hard to ski or live or any of the things. And so I think I say that to kids. I say it to parents too. What does it look like to try softer? That you can try, but you can let yourself off the hook. Because I think that's part of the feeling defeated and discouraged. I think parents to be aware of how you talk to yourself, because I think parents are more critical of themselves too than ever before. And I would challenge us in that, because I believe the way that you talk to yourself will inevitably be the way you talk to your kids without ever intending for it to be. I mean, I think you would probably never try to talk to somebody the way you talk to yourself, but it comes out. Because we get better at whatever we practice. And when we're practicing criticism, even if it's directed at ourselves, it will inevitably come out as somebody else we love.
Probably, especially in those kids that are a lot like you.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Like, then yes. And you don't, I don't want to talk to my child the way I talk to myself sometimes.
No, exactly.
It's really hard.
We talk about that a lot, that every parent has one child who pushes their buttons the most. And it's often the oldest child of your same gender or the one most like you.
Yeah, I feel like that's very true. But I love that concept of trying softer, because I think it is easy. And when we're feeling pressure, we're feeling like we need to be doing more. We're feeling anxious. We need to accomplish more. We need to look the best, do the best, everything Pinterest perfect. To just be like, well, we'll just try more. Just try. And it's not like trying's bad. I think that's where we're confused. Is like, it's good to try. It's good to succeed. It's good to do all the things that we're doing. We're just not doing it right.
Yes. As I mentioned before, we have a podcast, and this summer we're doing a Music City series. And obviously, because we're in Nashville, we have access to a lot of really amazing people. And last week we interviewed Thomas Rhett and Lauren Akins, and she's so neat. And she said, which I thought was so true. I never thought about this. She said, it's like we're looking at social media and we're not just trying to emulate one idea, one birthday party. We're trying to do every single one that we see, rather than realizing each person we're watching is only doing one. And now we think we have to do 30, and it's just too much. And I thought, that's so true.
Yeah, I never really thought of that either. But that is true. Wow. Lots to think about after this, Sissy.
Too much. You're so sweet. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to end because I think this resource is so amazing. Like, I cannot emphasize enough that I think every parent should read it. I think it's just so helpful. So I want to end, if there's someone listening who's really relating to this and like, okay, maybe I need to work through some stuff, need to read this book. I think if you're feeling anxious at all, or if you're just a parent, I think this book is a really good next step. But what is a good step after that if parents are feeling anxious?
So I now have written 4 books on anxiety. And I have a book called Raising Worry-Free Girls, just for parents of girls specifically about them. This is the first one that's about you as the parent. But in the introduction of that, I said, the reason I'm writing this book and the 2 books for kids is to say, I'm trying to work people like me out of a job. I want to give you tools of things you can do at home, which is what the book is about. I mean, it's like 3 months of counseling in one book was my intention, the Worry-Free Parent. And it may not be enough. And if it feels like you are using these tools and maybe it's moved the needle a smidge, but not as much as you want to, or it's uncovering these things that you feel like, okay, I've never talked about that, because we dig pretty deep into the past and into kind of how you got to this place. And so, or if it feels like it hadn't moved the needle at all, I would say, I want you to find a trusted counselor in your area and somebody you can talk to that, I have people I meet with quarterly. It's not even that it's weekly. It's just to say, hey, are we on the right track? Is there anything I need to be thinking about? What are some things I can be doing differently? But that you just have another voice that is helping you try softer, be more gentle with yourself, and giving you tools to work through the stuff that might be spreading over into the lives of your kids.
Yeah. Can you tell us actually, because I think when I talk to people, I feel like a lot of us are like, yeah, we should be going to see a counselor. I would love to do that. I have a really hard time finding one, or I've tried 4 and I don't like them. Like, how do you find a counselor?
It's so hard. There are resources like the American Association of Christian Counselors, but they have, I don't even know how many hundreds of resources. And I always feel like I want somebody who's been to that person, or somebody who's at least met that person and encountered them, because I want to know if it's potentially can be a good fit. So I usually recommend to call your church, ask who their referral list is, call your doctor, ask them who some of their favorite counselors are, ask some friends, especially if you hear the same name come up a couple of times. Then I think it's worth going and meeting that person. But I would say I think it is really important that you trust the person you're going to sit with. And there's some counselors, I think I have been to 5 different counselors over the course of my life. And there was a season I needed somebody to really challenge me and push me. And then there was a season that I needed somebody to be really kind and gentle with me. And that doesn't mean one counselor is better than the other. It just means we need different things at different times. And so don't be afraid to go see somebody and decide it's not a great fit and go meet a couple of different people. I'm the person who, I don't want to quit the person who cuts my hair because I feel guilty and I think I'm going to hurt their feelings. Do not treat counseling that way.
Me too.
We're fine. Go find somebody that feels like a really good fit. And it may take you some tries to find that.
Okay, I'm really glad you said that, because I'm that person too. And it's really hard for me to leave someone once I start seeing them. So I feel bad. I'm like, am I going to hurt their feelings? Are they going to feel like they're a bad counselor because I didn't see them again?
No, we know the same idea, that they're just better fits sometimes.
Yeah. Well, good. I hope that gives someone some freedom to try until they find the right fit.
That's right. And you can get a different person to cut your hair too. It's fine.
Try all the people.
Yes.
Sissy's giving you permission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go, do you have any other last encouragement for parents?
Well, I think just what we've talked about, that if you feel anxious, please know it really means you're a great parent, that you are trying so hard and it matters so much to you to get it right, and that you obviously love your kids deeply. And so that's part of one of the tools we talk about, that's reframing. And I just would want you to sit with that much more than I'm messing this up. It is way more about the fact that you care so deeply.
Thank you. Can you tell everyone where they can listen to your podcast, find your books, connect with you? Because you have a lot of stuff on Instagram too. So just tell us where we can find you.
Yes. raisingboysandgirls.com is our website, and all the things are linked there. And David Thomas, who's kind of my counterpart and does a lot more work with boys, he and I are very active on Instagram, trying to help as much as we can. I'm at Sissy Goff, and then we kind of alternate on Raising Boys and Girls. So any of those places you can find me.
Great. Thank you. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes for you. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate your time.
Well, you are delightful to talk to and grateful to be with you.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you learned something new in this episode. I really do challenge you to think about 2 things that you're doing for your kids that they can do and 2 things that you're doing that they can almost do. It's actually kind of hard, but it's so good, and you will see good fruit come from it for sure. So thank you for spending time with us today. May God bless you and keep you. May you feel renewed and rested by His presence today. May you cast all your anxieties onto Him because He cares for you and your heart. He will give you all you need to parent your kids well. You need only to be still. Thank you so much for listening to the Christian Parenting Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you love this podcast, would you please consider leaving a review and sharing it with a friend? This is the best way to reach more people and encourage even more parents. Christian Parenting is a donor-funded ministry, and we rely on friends like you to keep podcasts like this going. So to find out more about Christian parenting and to make a donation, head over to christianparenting.org or at christianparenting_org on Instagram. Thank you again. See you next week.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.